Welcome back to the SyncLodge Podcast Series Exploring Music. This is the second of 2 episodes titled Diversity with Alison Wenham and Stuart Dredge. Now, the conversation in this episode was recorded in January 2020. Since that time, there has been considerable efforts made to address the issues discussed. I believe this makes the points made even more relevant. Let's rejoin the conversation.
I saw a demo from a startup last week whose argument is that they've got technology to help streaming services be more like radio, where they'll stitch in announcement of the artist and the track title and little interview clips. And they were saying, we're going to try and make this like a medium with an emotional reaction where you don't know who you're listening to. Yeah. And that was kind of interesting, although obviously they were pitching their technology. But yeah, you realise how easy it is to lean back and just sort of say, this is quite pleasant.
Yeah. And maybe, I'm only flagging it as a concern because I did some research when I was chairing a committee at UK Music looking at tax breaks for the music industry. And we saw that with we did some really good research. I'll have to sort of look it up and get back to you on the numbers, the specific numbers. But basically there is a crisis ahead in finding headliners because, all the bands of the 60s and 70s, they've reformed and are actually taking those slots now. But it tells you something about the gap in the market for contemporary headliners. But maybe that format is also tired.
Of headliners at festivals.
Maybe
you're still going to have.
Will change.
Are they the panels of the festival's world? Maybe.
Yeah. You're still going to have festivals like obviously Glastonbury and such that want their Friday and Saturday night. Who's going to be the last artist on the stage? Who are we going to get?
Yeah. People get incredibly cross about that, don't they? And this has come back into diversity of gender and like when Jay-Z headlined Glastonbury, or everyone was like, "Oh, he's not a Glastonbury headliner because he's a rapper," and he smashed it. And Stormzy had the same. Stormzy had the same thing.
Absolutely smashed it.
But even when like Florence and the Machine headlined, because they were a replacement, weren't they? And people were like, "I'm not sure she's a Glastonbury headliner," and again she came out and just owned the stage in about 2 seconds. But you have these conversations of who has the right to the space on those big stages, and there's certain assumptions, I suppose.
So I think the structure of the industry and this kind of sector, which is the headline artist, that's also under pressure because we created a lot of those back in the 60s and 70s, and maybe that the heyday was then 60s, 70s, 80s, come through 90s. You look at the decline in what you could call a headline artist, and if you follow that line forward, you go, oh, this is we're headed for a problem, but maybe we're headed just for a different type of experience. Glastonbury, honourably, and Reading, and there are some festivals that will always be iconic in the. And actually, people book Glastonbury without any clue who the headline is going to be. So
they buy the tickets regardless.
They buy the tickets regardless. But I mean, the boutique festivals are doing very, very well. Very well.
You're going for the experiential. There you go.
There you go again. There you go again.
I mean, the thing.
I've played quite a few festivals around Europe, and the smaller ones. The main thing was the quality of the music. It's not necessarily reputation. They just want their people that are there to have a great time, and they want to make sure that it's fitting with their atmosphere. It wasn't like, are you famous?
Well, with Ben Turner and Rob DeBank, we founded the Association of Independent Festivals because they were having a similar dilemma. They wanted to get into a room and talk about stuff, and they didn't have a forum in which to do it. And they were members of AIM through their record company and loved what we did. So we basically, transferred the format over and started the independent festivals. And again, that was a fascinating journey for me because I'd never worked with promoters. And if you think record companies are a bit strange, promoters, people who build the equivalent of a town in a field for a weekend when it might rain cats and dogs, they are truly and utterly entrepreneurial and visionaries in a way, and maybe slightly mad as well, to throw in as well. But absolutely amazing experience. And they all, when we started to map that sector properly, to look into the numbers, to look into the economic contribution that music tourists made, we were able to make an incredibly compelling case about the value of music festivals, particularly smaller ones that would be, in a location near a town or in a town. We were able to prove that there was a measurable, something like 300 £25 per head contribution to the wider economy in that location. So it really helped the argument with councils on licensing, with the police on security, and they've grown. They've grown as a result, because I think they would find life a bit tough because they didn't have the numbers and they didn't have the forum to promote the value. And it's again about diversity. It's about cultural diversity. It's about economic diversity.
I find the festival, I mean, I obviously would, like every music fan, think I could program a brilliant festival. Really. And then would fall down logistics and budgets.
Do you think AI would program a great festival?
It'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, someone like Spotify could program a festival and invite the 40,000 people who they knew would love every band with their data.
Amazing, wouldn't
like they have that capability, I suppose. But like that idea of people who run festivals are like, right, we need to get the headliners, sell tickets.
Yeah.
We're going to introduce people to these bands. That even the lineup of the stages and who goes on and who. That's in its best is encouraging you to listen to something you haven't heard before.
Yes.
It's not just about seeing things you do. Which in a way, like coming back to all the algorithms stuff and streaming, we don't know anything about these algorithms really. So we have to just project our assumptions onto them. I think one thing you hear a lot is, does it gradually get narrower as it narrows down what you like until you're listening to one band? And that's been said since the beginning of music recommendations. You know, you end up listening to just Coldplay or something, which is a bit unfair on them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, one of the things I wonder about, and I'm not saying worried because I don't understand it yet, is if you're one of the big signals, I think, in this world is skipped, isn't it? If you skip something quickly, that tells Spotify, Apple Music, I don't like this. So I would always wonder what that means for bands who don't have the hooks up front or who are difficult and abrasive. I'm not even sure that they lose out. It might be that Spotify can say, well, I know the 30,000 people who love this abrasive.
I think they do. I think they do.
And that's an interesting question. That is, like, because you hear stories about songs have always walked towards the medium, haven't they? Like in the CD, albums became a certain length. And in streaming, people talk about put the hook up front, don't get skipped in the first 30 seconds, do this, do that. But I'm kind of interested in whether on the other side, these services are also helping the people who want different things find even more different things. Is it expanding our views as well?
Well, they know them, as you say. They know where they are and they know about them. So yeah, I'm sure they can cater for awkward buggers, you know, who don't sort of fall for the first hook in the first line.
And that's kind of exciting in a way. Like if you're an awkward bugger and you're served up 20 tracks of music for buggers every week by people you'd never heard of. I mean, I was thinking this the other day. We were thinking about, again, diversity of gender. So I was writing about country music and how there was a story about Spotify where if you did a playlist called country music, it just suggested men endlessly, and there was a big hoo-ha. And I was thinking, actually now, because quite a few of the buckets I listen to, so I like Scandinavian electro-pop, I like Courtney Barnett style. I like French bands with bored-sounding singers. there's certain buckets of mine that kind of female voices. And now I feel like Spotify is actually not serving me up many men. So the kind of the algorithm, it adapts to what you're listening to and opens up that.
I'm sure it does. I mean, I didn't get on very well with Pandora. Did you try Pandora?
I didn't get in before it was not here, before they closed it down.
Yeah, and I did. And I put in some, song artists that I liked, and they started to build me a radio stream. And very quickly I thought, you don't know me at all. If you think that by my sound bed, my sort of sandbox of my contribution to you mapping my algorithm was songs that had a great meaning for me. And then I realised that we kind of divorce the time and the place and the experience of when you first hear a song, who you're with, where you are, how old you are. And if you just serve someone back a sterile, what they think is almost a mirror image, you strip away so much of the experience of loving music. And I found it, from that point of view, really disappointing. So much so that I just stopped using it.
Spotify is totally confused by me. They have no idea what to do with me, because, as I was telling Stuart, with the podcast where it's really talking about artists, I build a playlist for it. And so some has been on scored music and composers, some have been on 80s funk, some have been, there's all these different categories.
Yeah.
And I'm building this, now if I just go in and listen, they have no idea what to do with me. They throw all kinds of stuff at me.
But I think this is one of the things I think that's quite an interesting topic, this idea of, I guess, when I grew up. So I grew up in the sort of 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and my discovery method was the evening session on Radio 1. It was The Enemy and Melody Maker. And it was these people who would play me or write about stuff that I didn't know, and with some signifier that I'd like it. And now we have this, again, diversity of recommenders, from algorithms to the playlist editors, still have radio. And that's a really important question. Is who is it who's kind of throwing the curveballs at you that you might not like but you might love? And I think we have more of those people now. And you can get quite snobby about it. You can get like, I don't use algorithmic curation, but actually you can get something brilliant from that.
I love it. I love the fact that somewhere in a deep vault, in a cave somewhere, there's an algorithm for me that's thinking ahead, because I don't. I'm probably not lean back, lean forward. I'm very much, do I like it, do I not like it? And I've always been like that. I've worked right across the genres. And right now I'm working with a really contemporary genre. So, I've gone from deep, early classical through, you name it. And that's why I've always been pretty, it's a direct emotional experience. Does it or does it not do it for me? That's all I measure things by. And when I used to go to opera a lot, sometimes, because it was part of our business, sometimes I would be looking at the stage and thinking, this is just not doing it for me, but the music would be sublime. And sometimes it would be the other way around, but it doesn't matter. I'm very kind of one-dimensional about music. I either do or I don't like it, and I don't care what genre it's in. I'm not interested in the snobbery that's associated with aficionados, because I've dealt with a lot of those in my life as well. But I love the idea that me being me, with this kind of very simplistic approach to music, that there's an algorithm thinking much more cleverly about it than I do.
And aware of all the other things that are being introduced into their database.
But my Spotify account is pretty confused, because I do listen to some really strange things.
But I'm with you on that. I'm very open, but I do instinctually like it or don't like it.
And I think at an emotional level. I mean, I once built an entire record label around the prefix TQ, which was the tingle quotient. Because that is what music, and I'm not saying great music because that's a very subjective thing, but that is what you're looking for, is that tingle quotient. Does it move you in a mysterious way? Does it connect with your brain, with your soul? Does it do something indefinable but tangible? Do you know what I mean? And it's called the tingle quotient, and actually psychologists and psychology professors have studied this, and there is an area in the brain that does respond to sounds and tones and harmonies in a way that we are not consciously provoking. It happens at an unconscious or subconscious level. I found that fascinating.
And we can't really articulate why we're feeling this way about it. And
your tingle quotient is probably completely different to mine.
One thing I'm quite thinking about a lot at the moment is the difference between for kids today and for when I grew up. Like, because when I had certain tastemakers, very narrow, and I kind of had to, because of money, I had to choose. I went down the Britpop route first, and it wasn't until I got to university and met a friend who was into dance music that I got that. Now, if you're a 14-year-old coming into this world and you've got a Spotify Apple account, you've got access to everything all at once.
I know. I watched this with my kids with awe.
And what does it mean? Do you think? Like,
I saw it with I was just in awe of the luck that they had to be born and growing up in an age when music was no longer a generational weapon. It was just something that you could connect with, and it did not matter whether it was new, old, style, whatever. And when I grew up, I saw the Who at the Lays. We had bands going through which became very, very famous, but it was live. It was pretty well all live. And I used to work in a record shop when I was 15, and the bus used to stop outside the record shop on a Saturday morning, and people used to pour off the bus and pour into the shop because the new Rolling Stones album was out. It was all very physical. It was very immediate. And so my dad, he started to Top of the Pops was the only show on TV which covered popular music, and I could see that he was actually quite attracted to the music. Long-haired layabouts was also a frequent comment. And what does he think he looks like?
I like the Cure when I was a teenager. My dad he called them the Curry, and they sort of it was like a generational obligation to say something.
But when I grew up, you were defined by the music that you hoped your parents hated. You needed that generational badge. This is my music, not your music. Emphatically,
you don't understand it.
You don't understand it, and you will embarrass and disgrace me if you so much as give an inkling to my friends that you like the music I like. It was incredibly powerful as a generational.
I grew up in totally the opposite situation. My dad was in the 60s a DJ on Radio Caroline here, and so he interviewed the Beatles and emceed the Rolling Stones, and so he had all the cool stuff. And so my dad's record collection was the record collection all my friends wanted to listen to.
Well, that's a very unique. That's a unique.
He had the Who stuff. He had Jimi Hendrix. He had all this stuff as it was coming out, and it was.
My dad was a wedding DJ in 1977 when he had me. So he had a massive record collection, and within that was some terrible wedding songs, but also a lot of great stuff too.
I could do.
But I was, and he still does wedding DJs now. But I was very snobbish. I was like, I'm not looking at your record collection. I like Blur and Oasis, and you don't understand them. And he probably understood them very well because he'd heard the Kinks and the Beatles, and
he probably had. But then when my kids started through their teens, started to listen to a lot of music, that's what blew me away, was that them, and they were listening to the Monkees and the Beatles and Bob Dylan and John Martin, and just you name it. And I just thought,
was that also alongside contemporary stuff?
Yeah.
Right. That's a brilliant.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter whether it was new, old. It didn't. It was a soundtrack. It wasn't a badge. It was amazing to watch that.
There's no barrier for kids to listen to all the music now, but there's no barrier for us to listen to all of it either. So, I know someone like Stormzy, for example. Your parents would like to say, "Oh, I think Stormzy's great." To a kid, there's no age limit on understanding or liking Stormzy.
No.
In the same way that there would have been, 20 years ago of liking whatever the key new cultural.
Yeah.
So I think we're all listening to more. I wonder what it would mean. Billie Eilish, I think about a bit, and it's like you can look at her influences on music as well as on who she is, and you can see they come from all over the place.
Yeah.
Maybe that is going to become the model from now on, that the kids will have taken in
your influence.
And what kind of music are you going to make if you have access to Public Enemy and Rage Against the Machine and Joni Mitchell and all this stuff all at once? What kind of music? Maybe you won't go down that route of making now music, and it might be the next generation of stars will make something completely new from all these.
I read an article recently about how last year some of the biggest stars, the biggest releases, were mixing genres. Really meshing them together. And this has become a whole thing where it's all of a sudden putting a genre label on music becomes irrelevant, because it is we just have to keep naming them, coming up with these silly names, so why do that?
Well, do you remember at the beginning of the year, the first time I ever wrote about Old Town Road and Lil Nas X was when Billboard was saying it's not country enough for the country charts. And there was a hoo-ha in the US about this song wasn't deemed eligible for country charts. And then he re-recorded it with Billy Ray Cyrus and by the end of the year, no one cared what genre it was in. It was just the biggest hit of the year. But it's interesting that there was that moment of the kind of consternation of this breaks. Yeah. We're not sure this belongs in the genre it claims to be.
But that's old school thinking of being stuck. This is what the music that we focus on. And this is, country music has changed a lot, and they do accept it in Nashville and other country radios. It's more rock to me. It's more it's rock pop stuff. But still having that, and with the diversity expanding and all the things, that maybe these stations will become old dinosaurs and will become just irrelevant.
Well, I read a piece about country music, and talking to people in Nashville about what young country fans grew up listening to, and they grew up listening to pop and country, and so 16-year-olds in the heartland of country, they love country music, but they also love pop music, they love rap, and they were saying for them, like, that's why, and they're the ones who are streaming in that whole demographic of country fans, and they're still listening to all these country artists, but they don't see those barriers, like you say, that have been historically like, you're in this silo, they won't meet.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, let's pose a challenge to you, put a question to you. The last while, the majors have been entering some of the emerging markets, as we call them, on the arms of a local partner, which I think is an entirely sensible strategy, because, Anglo-American domination has been the way for all of the past 50 odd years. Things are now changing. Those markets are opening up, they're becoming accessible, they need to be taken seriously, both in terms of local music and the opportunity for Anglo-American, or however you want to describe it, non-local music to flourish. So they tend to be doing partnerships to go in. Do we think that, given that the majors, as we know them, are not majors in those markets, the majors are different majors. They're large, often media corporations. Look at South Korea, look at India. There's very different industries there. Do we think that, say, in 10 years' time, those markets will have been westernized, or do you think we will have been easternized, or what do you think will happen to? Because I presume that the majors are going into those markets because they want to break those markets with their catalogues and with their priority signings, their artists. I presume that.
I wonder if they're kind of changing as we go. I mean, I guess Despacito is the one thing that was like, people will listen around the world to a Spanish language track, won't need a translation, won't need a Western artist on it, although Bieber was on it, wasn't he, for a bit. So I wonder if they're sort of, as those reasons are all right, they want to go in and break Western catalogue, but actually, why couldn't the next big global smash be a Chinese artist?
Absolutely no reason at all.
Or an Indian artist?
There's no barriers to that at all. But I just wonder whether the local markets will, obviously they'll undergo change, and this is where, cultural diversity that's driven by social, horizontal social reach will start to really blur the definitions
I think so.
of music.
I think so. And I think it's going to happen on both sides. I think the emerging markets will get influenced by the majors, signing artists, but also the Western markets will get influenced by the music that comes out of those markets. And I think it's going to mesh together. In Vienna, there's a radio station called FM4, which translates to FM Fear, which is kind of a funny thing. FM Fear. Yeah. And they play music that is mostly on the independent side. Right? They don't really play hits. There's a lot of stuff that is in the electronic world, and there's a lot of stuff in those styles of music that has Arabic instrumental melodies. But they're not Arabic artists. But they have this they're being influenced by this. They like this, they've heard it, and it's coming more and more into Vienna, into this part of Europe.
Yeah. Which sets the stage for the most amazing future for music making, doesn't it? If you go back to the turn of the century, back in the 19th, the 20th century, with composers like Debussy and Satie engaging in harmonic structures that were from the East. They weren't taking the tonal, the Western tones, they were taking and transporting them to the East. And that produced new harmonics and new enharmonics that really broadened classical music and stretched the boundaries and caused some outrageous moments, with Stravinsky and people like that.
Right.
But, we look now at this 21st century, and I think it's going to happen all over again, but in a really explosive and dynamic and amazing way. And so that sort of diversity is just going to be fabulous.
It's exciting. It's very exciting.
And the other thing, I suppose, is it's going to be the people from those places of benefiting. So I went to a couple of talks recently about what's happening in Nigeria, and Africa more generally, and Afrobeats, and how I think it's Davido sold out the O2 or sold the O2 in London without much marketing, just because he has a fan base here. It's not some British artists going to Nigeria, listen to music, coming back and making their album with an influence and coining it in. It's kind of the artist from there is coming over here and then, like you say, influencing all kinds of people. And, you know, Drake's a good example who goes around picking up stuff from different
I know,
places.
and that's because of social mobility. There are so many people that have been displaced one way or another around the world that there's enough of a local audience internationally to make it very much exportable and, from an economic standpoint, doable.
And pop is always the place where this stuff ends up influencing, isn't it? Like the big pop sound of one year will be taken from a certain kind of beat or something.
The music out of India, let's park Bollywood, but the music out of India I think is going to be massively influential. If it already is massively influential. DJs with the different beats and so on. But when I was with festivals, you know, we tend to have quite a myopic view, or we tended, I think, to have a myopic view, as in we did not really think globally and the real impact of what globalization is going to bring in a very positive sense to music and to music making and to the music industry. But when I was working with the festivals, we did an event with the British Council, and it was a fabulous day. We brought in about 20 festival promoters from around the world, and it was basically a get-together to learn from each other's experiences and how we marketed and what the legal and safety and other aspects of running a festival was. And during coffee break, I got talking to this guy who was Chinese, and I was very polite, and I said, you know, how do you do? My name's Nella, I'm chair of the AIF, and we're the organisers of this event, and do you have a festival? He said yes, and we were chatting away, and I said, where's your festival? He said, down in the south of China. And I said, is it a big festival? He said, not really, no, it's 250,000 people. and when I'd sort of picked myself up from the floor and managed to regain my equilibrium, I said, well, 250,000 people? He said yes. And that just shows you we don't have to facilitate this, it's already there. And we can just, you know, look forward to a time when all of that music comes to us. Maybe it will be sanitized a bit for Western ears and Western sort of taste. But in the end,
as we're talking through the likes of the streaming platforms and that there will be a way that you can go down the rabbit hole a bit. And if the main pop, those, as you said, sanitized stuff is what first comes over, there is the way to find all the other stuff. You don't have to fly to China and look through bins in record stores.
I mean, the other thing I was interested in is this idea of stuff that really connects locally. Not trying to be global. So a good example is there's this rapper in India called Divine, who his story was told in a film, and he did a talk at Medam last year, and he was talking about how he was rapping in English at the start because he was influenced by American rappers. And it was when he started rapping in Hindi that he really connected with his local audience. So he's not really feeling that urge that I've got to rap in English to do good things. And even grime here, like, it's not a language barrier, but I feel like it didn't have to kind of compromise its sound. Thinking, how can we make London understandable to Americans? Like in a way, it was the fact that it was so uncompromising and so kind of its thing that people came to it from elsewhere, going, this is different to what we have. So maybe that's the exciting thing, is you don't have to be, wherever you are in the world, you don't have to be thinking, how can I sanitize this? And even with Despacito, how do I translate it? Like my 10-year-old son, he's word for word on Despacito. He learnt the lyrics by listening to it.
Where I live in Austria, I was first there in 1997, and things have changed a lot from an artist's perspective of what a market is. And originally it was, okay, Austria is nothing. So you either look at Germany, or the main market is the UK and the US. And what they're doing there. If I want to have a career, okay, first I have to do sing in English, and I have to have certain instrumentations and certain ways of dealing with my music to actually approach that market. And now more and more of the artists are doing it in German, and then there's also Viennese, There's very difference between the Austrian German and the German German.
Wow.
There's a big difference. And then Vienna.
Well, in the language.
In the language
yes.
and the words that are used, and sometimes in the meaning of the words, right? And then Vienna has its own dialect, its own words. And so there's whole Viennese slang. Now there's artists that are just doing Viennese slang. And it's great stuff. It's got so much character. It's just got so much life to it.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting to see. As you're saying, that they're not seeing the need to go abroad and be successful in another market. They say, okay, I can build this and it's interesting. And through the streaming sites and everything, I can get it out there.
You're not second guessing yourself, which I think for music, if you're thinking, how will this be received, or how can I make this, however you're doing it, whether you're making it songs that are more catchy, that kind of gets in the way of the pure thing you're doing. And like to Nylon Connect last week, the conference, there was a chap from Poland talking about Polish hip hop, and that's a hugely thriving scene right now. Streaming is driving it. Germany, I think hip hop is enormous at the moment. Germany, look at in Russia, like these places.
Even in China, there's Chinese hip hop artists that are doing very well.
Yeah, and to come back to your thing, Alison, about as this grows, are those markets going to get westernized? I'm kind of interested. Like, I'm not sure.
I don't know. I mean, that's the big.
I hope it's a mesh, like I said. I hope it's a mesh of the two, where it's just.
I suspect it will be.
And you're
fusion.
You're seeing artists already, like, I mean, Major Lazer, one of the obvious ones, traveling around the world, finding collaborators, and. I'm not talking about them, but the general idea is the risk is you seem like someone who's saying, I need to get a Chinese singer for that market, I need to get a Latin American singer so I can target that market, I need to get someone from Nigeria to target that market. The danger is you seem cynical and it's commercial. But the other more optimistic side is that there'll be really interesting creative collaborations. And the other thing I've seen said at conferences is, I've seen it said more than I've seen it done, is this idea of traditionally the collaboration across borders would be like an American artist or British artist with someone from another place. And that would kind of make them global,
Well, that's what Paul Simon did back in the day.
Yeah. But now it's like, well, why shouldn't it be a K-pop artist and a Brazilian artist? Like maybe you don't need to have the Anglo person.
Yeah.
Maybe it is, and maybe what happens when K-pop meets kind of a Brazilian genre? That's going to be really fascinating.
Yeah.
The last perhaps look at diversity is one of your speakers last week was rather nervous about the entry of the venture capitalists into the music industry, buying up rights, and I don't share that. I think that the more the merrier. And some will be in for the long term and some will be in for the short term. But I think it's great the music is back on the block. And because we were written off in the noughties as a dying industry, and we're anything but. So to the point that you made about the fusion and the opportunity for all of these, what we used to rather patronisingly called third world markets, are now emerging markets, but they're also paying markets. And these are countries who historically have not had strong copyright law, not had a music industry to speak of. They've had a huge amount of music and live, but they've not turned it into a measurable economy, which you need copyright to do, really. And so, whereas there might be some concern about, the amount of money that musicians in this country, the UK, earn, because, they say it's an average of 15,000 a year. 90% of musicians earn an average of 15,000. I think it's really nice to think about that in terms of opportunity, to say that if there were musicians right across the world who were now earning £15,000, that would be £15,000 more than they'd ever earned from making music. So the numbers are going to increase. The revenue for the industry and everybody in it can only increase by the monetization of markets that have never before been able to generate revenue sufficient to call it an industry. And I mean, I always remember Charles at Merlin saying that, I think it was 2016, they paid something like $2 million to their members from activity in, I think it was Peru.
I remember that quote, yeah.
If you think about that this is the first time that you've ever been able to monetize your catalogue, your business, your artists in that country, but vice versa. The artists from Peru will start to be able to monetize the music they make across the world. That's also, I think, diversity at its finest.
And the power countries are becoming different, aren't they? I think it's no secret at all. Mexico and Brazil are in Spotify's top 5 markets for scale. So in terms of the number of streams. And there's money, like you say, there's money coming in now for those markets, maybe before. But also now, I think if you have a big hit in Mexico and Brazil, that's almost enough alone to get you onto Spotify's top 50 chart globally.
Yep.
These markets are so big, they can springboard you.
In their own right, yeah.
And that's, I think, one of the reasons for the Spanish language songs is that you can be massive in Brazil and suddenly you're 48th place on Spotify's global top 50, which is quite a widely listened to chart.
Yeah.
So suddenly, instead of being like the UK and America are our main priority markets and then we'll roll out elsewhere, maybe you start thinking about, well, we need to have a strategy for Mexico and Brazil. And so there's money going into there and building those markets.
It's exciting, very exciting.
It is. But I mean, when I had my record company many years ago, you couldn't get paid from Brazil.
Isn't there about 17 collective societies and
there are.
chaos?
There still are.
Yeah. Not chaos.
But you really couldn't get paid. I don't think they wanted currency going abroad. That's a sea change, an opportunity for everybody that makes music and lives from the making of music from artists.
The other thing about diversity, not to keep thinking of different things, I'm interested in whether diversity of what's being signed is going to be good or bad in the streaming world. Because I saw a talk Fast Forward last year at the conference, and it was Alexis from Interscope, I think. And she was saying that because streaming is bringing in money, and it's a good, solid, growing, that she was saying that they could take more risks with their signings. And this is like a big major label. She was saying that they could sign more artists and they could sign weirder artists around the sides. They're still looking for the big commercial hits, but there was now, and I wonder if that's one part of one major label talking. I wonder if that's something we're going to see, that the predictability of streaming income means labels can take more risks, and that might be quite exciting.
I think they absolutely can. Some of the smaller but well-run companies who I used to talk to when I ran AIM, when we worked in the physical market, the pattern of income would be that in the first 3 months you'd make 90% of the income that you'd ever see off of that artist's album release. Whereas now you can almost set your watch by the predictability of the monthly income that same band will produce in a streaming environment. So there's this long tail, which people said, does it exist? Does it not exist? Is it meaningful? It is there, but it is very reliable. So I think the analogy of signing weird things works for everybody, because smaller companies have a baseline now, which is predictable, which allows them to operate.
Yeah.
I imagine the signing conversation would be like, they're a bit weird, but they could be big in Mexico. Let's do it.
Well, who would have thought Baby Shark?
We wrote a story about, they've done a Navajo version of it, the Native American tribe, as part of promoting the language. So there's now, you can get Baby Shark in all kinds of languages.
Navajo.
I believe there might have been a Hindi version too. It's become this franchise of
franchise.
Wow.
But it's because I think like journalists are always looking for trends and patterns, aren't they? But I think one of the exciting things is there are some of these things are just not patterns anymore.
And they're not. You can't predict trends.
Yeah.
I mean, there are shooting stars all over the place.
Yeah, that's right.
And nobody knows where they're going to come from.
It's not really trends then, is it? It's it's activity.
There's a difference between a trend and a phenomenon. And I think we're in the age of the phenomena, where things just suddenly break out from nowhere. And you go, where did that come from? And it's instantly massive. And what was the Korean?
Oh, Psy, Gangnam Style?
Gangnam Style.
Yeah. No one said a slightly portly South Korean rapper doing horse dancing. No one predicted that trend that year.
He thought it was very strange too, right? If you ever saw him,
I believe he did,
He just thought, what's going on? Why are all these people into it? This is weird.
But it's interesting, I think, because I saw a talk from YouTube's head in South Korea and Greater China, Sun Lee, last week. Yeah. And she was saying that, everyone knows about Psy and Gangnam Style coming through. But now you look at what's happening with BTS and Blackpink and this wave of Korean artists who are not doing a novelty hit, they're breaking globally and people are coming to their concerts and screaming even though all lyrics are in Korean. And in a way, that shooting star of Psy, I think, still opens some pathways that now it's not a novelty, it's kind of actual artists coming through. So like you said, I'm not sure what pathways Lil Nas X would have opened with Old Town Road. It's not going to be endless country rap songs, but there's going to be these follow-on effects.
Opens it up and it makes it so that it being different is actually very acceptable.
And I think the independent sector around the world is very well positioned to help promote and to fast track these careers, because they are very agile and they're on the ground and they're here and see things quickly, whereas the majors will probably stand back a bit and wait for the second push of those artists.
Yeah, maybe start trying to buy up those independent.
Well, I mean, Stormzy had travelled a very long way actually before Warner's.
It doesn't seem to be any secret. Like, actually, at 9 on the Clock, someone from Def Jam was talking about this. Yeah, we're coming in a little later, we're paying a little more. And that opens up that space, doesn't it, for all kinds of people to develop artists. I mean, even like Platoon, the company here in the UK, which Apple bought in the end. Like this idea of artist development companies, they're not really labels, they're not distributors, they're kind of working with artists to kind of help them find who they are. And that's an exciting thing, these new entities that we wouldn't have thought about a few years ago. Yeah, it comes back to what I said at the beginning of it, because I think diversity is this word that amongst a certain class of white man gets them very cross. Like, and we have this thing in the pub here with Lawrence Fox, the actor, who's become the standard bearer for criticising woke young people with their ideas. But so when you think about all the different things we've talked about in diversity, there's so many. It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting to have more different kinds of music, more different countries. It's exciting to have more different people in the industry. It's not like this yoke that people.
I think it's totally inevitable. In all forms of, even with our food, with our fashions, with the way we view the world, I think it's inevitable.
The music industry narrowed down so dramatically during the 90s that it became incredibly formulaic, even in terms of genre. It was follow my leader. So you got one away, and then everybody jumped in and tried to form an orderly queue in that space. That's right. And in terms of choice, it was almost sterile, certainly concentrated and constipated, and it wasn't a healthy environment. When you look now, I mean, it really is chalk and cheese. I mean, this is going to be a fantastic period for the music and the industry. And on that note, I think we probably...
That's a great ending. Well, thank you both.
Thank you
very much, Alison and Stuart, for coming in, exploring music. That brings us to the end of the second of 2 episodes titled Diversity with Alison Wenham and Stuart Dredge. This episode was recorded at The Joint, the Central London rehearsal studios. For more information, please visit thejoint.org.uk. You'll be listening to the SyncLodge Podcast Series Exploring Music. My name is Lionel Lodge, and I thank you very much for joining us. Till next time.